Welcome to GW Integrative Medicine, the podcast about disease prevention and health promotion from the Office of Integrative Medicine and Health at the George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences.
I'm your co-host, Dr. Misha Kogan, Medical Director of the GW Center for Integrative Medicine and Associate Professor of Medicine here at GW.
And I'm Janet Rodriguez, your co-host and the office's Administrative Director. Today, we're going to discuss DETOXIFY, the everyday toxins harming your immune system and how to defend against them. It's a brand new book, just came out, and we're going to talk to the book's author, Dr. Aly Cohen. She is one of the world's leading experts on environmental health.
Dr. Cohen is triple boarded, that's 3 boards, certified in internal medicine, rheumatology, and integrative medicine. She's on faculty of the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine, Southern California University of Health Sciences, and the University of California, Irvine, where she creates and manages environmental medicine curriculum for doctors and researchers. Welcome back to GW. Aly, you were with us before. We're so
3 years
excited.
ago?
Exactly. You're so excited to have you back.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. You guys are great. And thank you for having me and sharing with your audience.
You know, I think this topic, I'll start with this. This topic is, in my opinion, is the most important global crisis we face, not necessarily as a whole society, but as individuals, right? I mean, and it's a crisis. Toxicity is a crisis that people really do not understand. They don't see it. Regular physicians, for most part, have no idea what this is at all. They don't even know how to look into this topic. So I think with that in mind, I think what we should talk about, particularly as a beginning, like what is the toxins, right? Because it's as simple as that. Most people simply don't have a concept of, acute versus chronic. So Dr. Cohen, walk us through this.
Okay, well, it is a big topic, and I will say you're absolutely right. Most people, everyday people don't understand that there is a problem. So I first have to introduce what the issue is and why we should even care.
Mm-hmm.
And you're correct on the fact that the healthcare institutions are not trained on this information, even now when we know so much about how environmental chemicals affect human health. So it's almost crazy not to have this really as the cornerstone of medical education on, nursing and healthcare of any kind. We should be teaching this. So that being said, the system needs work. But what I have chosen to do, given my frustration, is to really, plug away at teaching everyday people and physicians, if they're interested, and healthcare providers, how to manage and navigate this really difficult topic. So I'll start by talking about the problem. The problem is that in the United States, we have little to no regulation on the chemicals that are created, the synthetic, man-made, human-made, female-made, man-made, whatever you want to call it, chemicals that are created that go into so much of what we eat, what we drink, that make their way, unfortunately, into our drinking water systems, which we can absolutely talk about in our cosmetics, personal care, cleaning, even our textiles, stain guard chemicals, antimicrobial chemicals that keep us, getting no infection worries, that those are over the top. So the idea that we have no regulation is really the starting point, because when you don't have regulation and mandated testing for safety or toxicity, especially in populations like pregnant women to affect the fetus, or young children, or the elderly who have immune compromised systems anyway as they age, we all do, or even immune compromised people, that is pretty pervasive, as we'll talk about since I'm a rheumatologist. The idea is that that's the starting point. So no required testing. Then you get into, the time in human civilization where we're creating, particularly after World War II, thousands and thousands of chemicals were created. Plastics to conserve natural resources. So you drop your plates and they bounce back, right? You're saving, the 50s moms lots of time because they don't have to clean up dishes that break. You have fighter pilots and pilot jets that have plexiglass, that's plastic. You have pesticides for fighting in World War II so that soldiers don't get, bitten with lots of, malaria and other infectious diseases. So, then you have the food system that's changed dramatically, where you're spraying lots of toxic pesticides and fertilizing chemicals to to basically argue to save, lots of crops for increased hunger around the world, which has really actually panned out to be quite poor evidence on that issue in many areas. So the idea that we had an explosion of chemicals, they're unregulated, they make their way into our products. You can't even get them off the market if they end up giving you a rash, your cosmetics, your personal care products. It's very dominated by the rights of the manufacturers and free market. So that's really the problem. And then when we get into what these chemicals have now been found to show, including immune and endocrine and hormone system disruption, which I'm going to get into, you can see how they make their way into our body, how they can disrupt a lot of normal physiology, and then they kind of lead into both acute and chronic illnesses. So that's the storyline, in short, but we'll get into, and we haven't seen these chemicals in millions of years of evolution. I mean, let's step back a second. We've been evolving for over 4.5 million years. These chemicals, 95,000 is the going number right now of solvents, industrial chemicals. They have only been introduced into the human experience, the modern human experience, over about 75 years. And that's a lot of change to make the human body's detoxification systems work, to evolve to manage them, to regulate them in the system, to manage to get them out of the system without causing harm.
Aly, how did you get involved in this topic in this area of medicine?
It was not by choice. I will say I'll be very, I write about this in a previous book, and also I go into detail in this book in the introduction. I was a young mom with two young kids, I think 3 and 1 at the time. And I had a golden retriever who was my firstborn. He was like 4.5. And he got really sick while I was busy, a new rheumatologist starting out and 2 kids and just a busy life like everyone else, right? And the dog got sick and I thought he swallowed a sock, right? He's a golden. And what ended up, right? I mean, they eat everything and you never
They
know
do. They
what'll come
do.
out the other end, right? And what happened he started to get jaundice, yellow, and we thought, okay, still could be an acute issue. It turned out that he had what is very rare in dogs. He was diagnosed with autoimmune hepatitis, so autoimmune disease of the liver. So his body's immune system was attacking his own body.
Wow.
Liver. And this is, like I said, very unusual in dogs, very unusual in golden retrievers. And ironically, this is the area of work that I was trained in at the time he was diagnosed. I was an autoimmune disease specialist, a rheumatologist, knew at the time, but still had some idea that this was a problem. And I was so heartbroken and so just confused by this young golden retriever getting exposed to something, I assumed. So I looked into his water and his food. I looked to see if it was contaminated. At that time, there was some melamine contaminations from China and plastics. I mean, this was all going on at that time, but we live in a farm in New Jersey. I thought maybe the pesticides that they always spray around us, maybe the water system got a hold of those. Anyway, I did a deep dive on him. And of course, at that time, I was eating Cheese Whiz and Oreos. I mean, I wasn't in any way one to speak, because I didn't know that those foods had chemicals that were problematic. And here I am looking into things that are more kind of obscure, like pesticides, right? Water contamination. I was thinking it was like an acute, break in a pipe somewhere. Well, it turns out that, the more I uncovered about him and looking into products in his plastic toy and all that stuff, all the chemicals, I was finding that even humans in the human component of our society of US regulation was just non-existent. And it really just
Which
started.
is really horrifying.
Oh, I was just and my dog going, "Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?" Because I didn't even know how to even process that information. And the more I read the medical journals, the actual journals that had published all of this information about bisphenol A at the time, BPA being a compound that still continues to be pervasive, even though it was taken out of plastic baby bottles in 2012 by my co-author for 2 other books. He's remarkable because he helped show the science around internationally and nationally around how that particular compound was affecting hormones, a hormone disrupting chemical, an endocrine disrupting chemical. I just had no clue that those chemicals were affecting human health. And like I said, it was a journey. It started off as a horrible situation, like many people turn their passions when they get hit right here, right in the chest, right in the heart. And it just takes them and leads them down an entirely different path that they thought that their life would never go in. And that's what happened.
So let's pivot to the actual topic, right? So we talked about toxicity a lot in the past week. Of course, we're talking today, but what can we do? I mean, I think your first book was kind of more academic. Then you had just recently, or more recently, you had a book that was more public book, but about just toxins. And now this third book, new book, the brand new book, is the Detoxify. So what can we do? I mean, you just put this horrendous picture in front of us, which I actually
Yeah, have a good day.
completely agree with. Exactly. I hope no
No,
neurologists.
nothing to see here.
Yeah,
I hope no neurologists listening to this. In neurology, they have this motto: diagnose and ideose. So we're not going to do that to you. So we we're going to tell you, hopefully now, that it's not all that bad news.
yeah.
So so what should we do? I mean, yeah, so 95,000 toxins all around it, but we can live with that successfully. So the
Yeah.
book itself, and let's start with just tell us a little bit about the book before we actually jump into a 21-day program.
Yeah, so the book Detoxify had to be an active verb. I was insistent that the title be an active positive verb, okay? And I mean that because so much of this topic is daunting to so many people when you don't fully understand the scope, that it was really important to come out and really get to the point. Like, listen, I have been doing this work as a rheumatologist for 20 years. I have a lot to say about this. I can clinically on the front lines, as you do too, Misha, right? I
Hmm.
can speak to how some of these recommendations work, how some of the supplements work, how clean food works, because I'm
Hmm.
seeing and handling folks every day that are working through this stuff. And so the book really came out. I think it couldn't have been written a few years earlier. It's interesting. I kind of think about where I am in my training and career. I don't think it would be as good of a book if it was 5 years ago, because now I feel 20 years under my belt of clinical rheumatology
Hmm.
from a Western training, from an integrative medicine training, and then now loaded with all this environmental chemical information. So it all came together. And the book is really kind of describing, I have patient cases and really talking about how people not only, how these chemicals work on the immune system, not just as has been previously described and written and studied so heavily on the immune system, I'm sorry, on the hormones of the body, but also on the immune system of the body. And as a rheumatologist, this plays right into the clinical stuff I see as rheumatoid lupus, Crohn's disease, MS. I mean, there's over 80 diagnosable, or at least criteria for in the textbook, 80 autoimmune diseases that we have. However, there's lots of stuff that's gray zone. There's lots of stuff that does not fit criteria for any one diagnosis, which is really, again, limiting for patients physicians don't necessarily categorize them, or at least try to move in through that. But the book was really trying to show how chemicals have every bit of data to show, many of them, they can harm the human immune system. And they can harm the immune system because, again, the immune system looks at many of these exposures as enemies. And when you have chemicals that the human body has never seen for millions of years, and many of these chemicals, they get in through our skin when we put personal care products on. They get into us through ingestion of foods, even healthy foods that we think are healthy, not just processed and ultra processed foods, right? We know some of those are like really bad, right? But even the pesticides that are on conventional fruits and vegetables, and I'm going to tell people how to get around that. I don't want people to be like, oh yeah, we all have to be rich and we all have to, not true. Okay, but I will say that we get them in our bodies through many routes into the body. So skin, um, breathing, we breathe in our air fresheners and our candles and all these synthetic fragrances and things that we don't choose to breathe in, like, combustion and walking through the city, or, any
Mold.
molds, any number of exposures through air. And we walk through life, right? Air changes very rapidly. And then we also have drinking water, which I spent a lot of time talking about in the book, a whole chapter, because I think by volume we underestimate how the contaminants that do get into water, and I'll talk about that, actually have effects over time, even if they're very, very low levels, parts per million, parts per trillion. So all those roots. And then I will always say, the feminine care product industry and the vaginal exposure. we get young women of all ages, because we know that that tissue in the vaginal canal is so absorptive. We've actually created medications to put there to absorb, like estradiol, so we know that that tissue is very absorptive. Again, it's another route of entry into the body, where if we start to really think about all of those exposures, then it's not a surprise to us that when you test blood, breast milk, urine, that we have them in our blood, breast milk, and urine. So the goal is really to teach people why why some of these very common everyday toxins are toxins, how they work, how they get into your body, so you can suss out how to remove them. And then also understand how they play a role not only in the development of some immune disorders, but also how these can affect flares for people who are suffering from any number of immune disorders. And there's truth to be told, they can really manage their diseases much better just by making very simple changes.
So I think it was Cara Fitzgerald who's using the example of bucket, which I kind of like. Sort of, you have a capacity to detoxify, right? And then when the system can no longer handle something, that's when we actually see the failure, right? Like just for purely mechanical way of thinking about it. If you're sort of too full of something, you can't detox it efficiently anymore. So I think I would love for listeners to sort of grasp this concept, not just on the bucket analogy, but in a little bit more detail. So, I know you cover a lot in the book, like what is methylation, so what are some of the key steps of those detoxifications, so you can constantly unloading the bucket, so to speak. What do you think is sort of the, maybe in just a couple of words, what would the most important aspects here? Or like how should people think and act? And then I think after that, let's go into the actual plan, because the 21-day plan.
Yeah. So a couple good questions. I mean, really great questions there. So I had to come up, because I teach a lot of other physicians in high school and now college. So I had to really come up with, all right, big topic. How do we bite this off and really get into it? So I created something called the 4 A's of environmental health, and I apply it in a lot of aspects. And so the first A is assess. Okay, because you got to know what you're getting exposed to in order to go after it. Number one, I mean, very simplistically, I go obviously into more detail. Number two, the second A is avoid. Okay, so we want to get rid of the things that we know are affecting the body or think are affecting the body, that are man-made, synthetic, we have data on. Even if we don't have great data on, we can make a precautionary principle type of decision to remove it from our lives. The third one is add. Okay, so this is a big component of this story. You can take away lots of stuff from your body and you can reduce those numbers, and I can measure them. You don't necessarily need any testing. We'll get into that. But you have to add in certain nutritional components that we have data showing offsets damage from these exposures. So I say we haven't evolved long enough to manage a lot of these new chemicals, but we have the ability, we've found, to offset some of the damage that comes from these exposures. And so you can take away the problem, right? The triggers, but you need to add in what we call nutritional sufficiency. You need to be nutritionally sufficient to get an adequate amount of I would say firearms to knock off what's coming at you. And I say this because we have, things like green leafy vegetables with vitamin B9, folic acid and folate. We have omega 3s, which we'll talk about quality and all that. But omega 3s have been shown to offset many of the exposures, especially of PCBs and some heavy metals. We know that in children who have had adequate amounts of vitamin C and iron in their system, they offset the exposures to lead. And I talk about these cases because it's really not just about taking away the trigger, which is key. It's really about adding in the firepower into your cells that we've had for millions of years. I call it human fertilizer. And that's what really helps to offset and gives the body the nutritional components that it needs. And then the fourth A, because we said assess, avoid, add, which is critical. The last one is allow. And the reason I put in allow is because, having worked on the front lines of medicine, as you have too, humans, including ourselves, are not perfect. I color my hair and I still want to color my hair. My kids, drink Gatorade on the field, which I really wish they didn't, on artificial turf. And, we go to birthdays and we travel on vacation. The allow component is to say this is a journey. This is a process. It was for me. I was eating Cheez Whiz and Oreos for many, many years and didn't think much of it. And that's the point. Point is that this is not a diet. What I'm trying to show people is that when you layer in really healthy, reasonable, cost-effective changes into your day-to-day life, it becomes lifestyle, not a diet. And that's stickability. That's when it sticks and has real benefits for human health.
Totally guilty here. I had a big chunk of tuna a few days ago. It was, well, they just caught it like 3 days before. It was a friend of ours. They caught it right out of the Long Island, and I was like, okay, I have to have the piece of this. I think this was a first piece of tuna in like maybe 5 or 6 years.
Oh, I get
So
it. I was at a conference and had a tuna sandwich because there was nothing else.
that's right.
So I mean, and mine was probably canned. So, you did better than me with wild caught. But, the point is that life is never going to be perfect. You want to go
No.
like the 80-20 route. You know what I mean? And I think that is really successful. And I've seen it. I've seen the numbers and I've seen it clinically improve people's, conditions. So it's just one of those things where you have to have that or else people just give up.
All right, 21-day plan.
Tell us about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I created this 21-day plan because, again, had 10 years on this book to really think it through is how people really incorporate it. And the 21-day plan, I think, is very reasonable. It's like day 1, day 2, and it's not overloaded and you can still go to work. You don't have to go to yoga. It's like you can really incorporate changes. I mean, you can still go to yoga and do this stuff, but
Please
I
go
mean,
to yoga, folks. Please go to yoga.
look, I talk to
There's a
people.
Janet soft spot right there.
I do like yoga. I mean, but look, I talk to people like we're all mere mortals, we're not, sitting around biohacking and anti-aging our way into like high products on TikTok. And I really want people to conserve their money. I want them to think about what they spend on, not do a lot of testing. I can tell you you're already contaminated for the most part. I want you to get a reverse osmosis water filter that's less than $300 for your kitchen, not spend 6 to 10 grand on a whole house filtration system. I mean, if you have the money and you want to do it, all the power. But I really think for most people, money's hard, money's tight. We have lots of expenses. I want you to make sure you use it in the way that's highest yield for human health. That's how I look at it. So the 21-day plan was really having that in mind. And I really went back to my roots of where did I start? I really thought about the drawer and I write about this stuff. I'm very honest, probably to a fault. I think about like the drawer, the day that I took a whole drawer of plug in Bay Breeze, Ocean Spray, pumpkin, latte, plug-ins that I had and I just chucked them. I wish I could have returned them. I probably would have made some money, but the idea was that I started to really think about that was when I was into phthalates and understanding how fragrance chemicals are so pervasive and that they have effects on male genitalia and in the immune system and hormone disruption and breast cancer, risk. And it's stuff we smell. It's literally perfumes and in detergents and how, cleaning products and air fresheners. And I thought, why do I want to breathe this stuff in? Like oxygen, it gets right into your bloodstream, like with one breath, so it's in your body. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to start cutting those out. And it took a lot of years. I'm still progressing. I'm still progressing and I'm still getting excited about new things to add in or take out. It's an ongoing situation. So 21 days, and I think people will get a really good start. I think it's reasonable, and I'm hoping people will embrace some of these ideas.
And friends, I just checked Amazon and you can get Ailey's new book, Detoxify: The Everyday Toxins Harming Your Immune System and How to Defend Them. You can buy hardback, you can buy Kindle. If you are not into that, you can do Audible as well, or buy it from your favorite bookseller. And if that's not your thing, then ask your local library to carry the book and then get the book. Ailey, where can people find you on the socials or wherever where they want to find you online? Where?
Thanks, Janet. So yeah, I started on the socials first. I had a voice and I couldn't wait to share some of the stuff I was working through. It's the Smart Human with Aly Cohen or whatever on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. I have a podcast myself. I interview, I don't know, Dr. Kogan, Misha Kogan
Yes.
guest on my podcast. That was a great conversation. Thank you so much for doing that. And so yeah, the Smart Human has been the place where Facebook, all of it, where I can really share day-to-day nuggets in bulleted form, which is how I like to learn. I like to learn the problem and why it matters, and then there's always a solution, or else I don't post on it. So the Smart Human is my baby, and doesn't talk back to me, but yeah, it's my baby. And yeah, I'd love people to follow there if they're interested.
I think that's all the time we have for today. Wonderful to have you here today. I think sounds like we're gonna start having this regular. So maybe when the fourth book comes out, we'll have you
Oh,
back,
That'll be
or
about
maybe
3 years.
before.
oh,
Yeah,
geez.
it's been a couple of years between each. Um, but I'm seriously thinking about another topic in, sort of, once you detoxified, I think the next very intensive conversation is how do you sort of stay detoxed in essence? Like, how do you maintain this knowing that we're constantly going to be seeing new things coming at us? That's
Yeah.
actually this topic will never end. In fact, it will get more and more important as the time
Yeah, I think
comes,
it's
for sure.
critical. I
It's a
mean,
critical topic.
we see so much new autoimmune diseases, not only
Hmm.
with people who have no family history, literally, but also at younger ages, as we're seeing with cancers. We see that in the news a lot. So I want people to really think about how high school, younger, always great times to introduce these topics and to arm our kids and our lives with this information. Yeah.
And of course you're a rheumatologist, so you're mostly dealing with rheumatologic issues. But I'm a geriatrician, so I have a huge neurodegenerative practice with Parkinson, Alzheimer's, and those are, to me, the toxicity illnesses. And and that's not that term I just used, toxicity illnesses, for those two conditions. Like, the regular neurologist will bite my head off, because it doesn't occur to people that often these conditions are almost purely toxic states. And where do you start with this? And so I think whole separate conversation. We'll have you back for sure,
I
sooner or
appreciate
later.
you to do it. Thank you so much.
Meantime, check out the links. I think we'll make sure that we have ways for you guys to also get links to your website. I think we can post, at least we can post on our website, right? And
Ailey has
on
a
our
great
Medium.
website, and we'll definitely include that in the show notes and some other links. This was the GW Integrative Medicine podcast from the GW Office of Integrative Medicine and Health.
I'm Dr. Misha Kogan.
I'm Janet Rodriguez. Thanks for listening.